I was expecting that video to go on a bit longer. It's a much longer video. I'm not sure why we didn't show all of it. So welcome. Welcome to RBC Disruptors. I would first like to acknowledge that we're on the land of the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. So this is a big month for diversity and inclusion in our city, in our country, and particularly at RBC. Tomorrow is National Indigenous Day, and we're going to have a smudging ceremony, I think, in this very room tomorrow to mark that day. And on Sunday is a very large day in the city and for RBC. We have 800 RBCers walking with great pride in the Pride Parade. Have I lost my mic? I'll turn it down. So again, very, very important week, very important to the culture of RBC. And yesterday I had the chance to spend an hour up at our branch at Church in Wellesley, where we celebrate Pride 365. And it's not just about the day, it's not just about the week, the month, but it's about celebrating Pride 365 days a year. And I had a chance to sit down with the team and talk to them about the video that you saw has gone around our organization and the faces of diversity and how important it is to talk about how much progress we've made, but how much work we have to do. And I think as you go through that video, and I wish we could show it again at the end, you hear everybody's story, and they talk about how hard it is to feel included in society and the differences that we have to recognize and accept. And so we've made so much progress on conscious bias in other areas, but the video really highlights in our society has to recognize that we still have enormous work to do. And I think for me, just being at the branch yesterday and talking to the employees, hearing how customers react, seeing the pride they have in the organization, the pride also in recognizing that we're still on a journey of change. For us at RBC, how could we connect with our customers? How could we connect with such a diverse country, diverse customer base if we weren't reflecting that world ourselves? How could we see a customer and understand a customer in a true fashion if we didn't reflect the customer group and the country that we work with? So diversity for us is about truly understanding our clients, being able to empathize with our clients and to meet their needs. But we also see diversity leading to enormous innovation. I was on this stage exactly a week ago with all of my colleagues from Group Executive talking about our strategy at RBC and the innovation strategy and the ventures and how we're trying to change banking and our vision for 2025. We spent 5 hours, I'm only going to spend another 3 minutes here, we spent 5 hours last week telling our story of innovation and the diversity on the stage and the diversity of thought that created that strategy was in the room and was on stage. And I think it just came to life for us in front of our investors, in front of our analysts. So I think diversity within the organization for customers and insight, diversity for innovation is mission critical for us as an organization. And we take great pride in that. We are ranked #1 in Pride at the Workplace and Inclusion Index, which we're very, very proud of. So today is a very great day. We have got Dax Dasilva with us. Dan is founder of Lightspeed. It's an incredible Canadian success story, really focused on retail and cafes and restaurants, creating an ERP solution. I think, Dan, you've got $15 billion of payment flow through your firm, so it's great to have you here. I think it's an exciting story, a great Canadian innovator. But more than that, Dan also founded Never Apart, an organization he's worked with for some time, but really focused on helping others become included in our workforce, included in our society. You've done some amazing work and positive change in the organization. I know you and John are certainly going to talk about that. So I want to thank you for joining us today. I think it's going to be a great session. It's an important week, an important month, but from our organization's perspective, Pride 365 is about living this every day. So with that, I think I'm going to cue a video. I'm going to invite John up to take the stage. Thank you.
Know your job. Enjoy it. But also enjoy the people that you're working with. Be considerate of them. And be considerate of your employer. Remember those simple rules, and you'll get along in the business world.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to RBC Disruptors. I'm John Stackhouse, and it's my pleasure to host our monthly conversation about innovation, disruption, and how technology is changing everything around us. And this month, we've got a really special Disruptors focused on pride. And you couldn't find a better guest than Dax Dasilva, who's joining us here today to talk about his amazing company, Lightspeed. We'll get into that, but also about the voice that he is spreading across the country and around the world for diversity and innovation, but particularly on behalf of the LGBTQ community. So lots that we'll get into. Dax, thanks so much for coming
John,
to RBC this morning. Dave, thanks for that great introduction and for being with us today. It's a great way to kick off this day and to celebrate Pride at RBC. If you're joining us on Facebook or WebEx, welcome. Please join the conversation through Facebook. You can share your questions, which we'll try to get to over the next 45 minutes here with Dax. Lightspeed, if you're not familiar with it, is one of Canada's great tech startups. Started about 15 years ago, now has 600 or so employees, 8 offices around the world, market valuation based on your last fundraising of close to $1 billion, 50,000 customers. We'll get into some of the software issues that you're grappling with as you try to build it out from Montreal. But Dax, maybe we can start with your own background. You've had an incredible life journey. Take us back to maybe a time as a kid when you got into technology. I think you started coding when you were 13.
Yeah.
So take us back then and tell us what got you hooked on tech.
Always a artistic, academic, child. My father, my parents immigrated from Africa as refugees, and my dad, took up welding. He was a journalist, a communications person back in Africa. Took up welding in a manufacturing company, but then they discovered his talents, and so he went into corporate communications at this manufacturing company, and then he used to bring home the original Mac. To do design work at home, and that's when I discovered the Mac. And for me, it was just this magical, piece of technology that really blended the liberal arts with design and technology in a way that I'd never seen before. And I was maybe 9 or 10, and I got my own Mac when I was about 12. Even though that was 3-4 times the price of a regular PC. And by the time I was 13, I was actually apprenticing at an Apple developer that was the son of the CEO of my father. So really started developing at an early age, and this was in British Columbia. I grew up in Vancouver. And all through my teens and 20s was building software for the different Apple dealerships or the forestry companies or all sorts of different businesses. So that was all sort of the build-up to starting Lightspeed later.
But then you decided to study religion, not technology. Take us through that choice, because that comes. we'll come back to that on the innovation front.
So for anybody with a liberal arts degree, I found tremendous value in making a switch from computer science. I did a year of computer science, after high school, and I thought, this is just a logical thing. I've been doing technology, and so computer science is the next step. But after a year of doing math and statistics and calculus and engineering, I'm like, I'm not an engineer. I enjoyed software because of creating design that was human interaction focused and bringing it to life through programming. But what I was really interested, because while I was building this software building practice, I was also doing a tech support and consulting practice because I loved people, and I loved watching how people worked with software. And so that was just as much as interesting to me, or more interesting to me, than the engineering aspect of which, I don't think I come from a family of engineers. I come from a family of creatives and artists and very spiritual people, and that's that is why I pursued sort of I left university for a year, University of British Columbia, came back to do art history and religious studies, and that was really for myself, and I did 3 years of that, and I think that really if the first part of my self-education and computer science was, well, ended up in Lightspeed, the second part of my education with art history and religious studies ended up being really never apart, and that part of my project, part of my life project,
You discovered this amazing intersection of creativity and technology,
right,
that is at the root of so much of what you're doing in your company, but also in your work in diversity. Maybe share a bit more of your thinking on on that intersection, about how creativity, and you've also mentioned spirituality, sort of collides but harnesses technology.
Yeah. So I mean, I think what sparked my imagination. I mean, I don't think I would have been particularly inspired by a DOS prompt. I was somebody that got inspired by the Mac. Got inspired by Steve Jobs,
by its design,
or
its power.
And that kind of creativity. And so I think that the origins of Lightspeed, who was involved, the kind of creative types, the kind of solutions we were able to come up with. Technology is a part of it, but I think human creativity, the diversity of human creativity, the different perspectives, all of that results in very innovative solutions. And I think that's for a company, we just turned 13 this year, so our bar mitzvah year. We're a young adult, terrible teen. We're in the sixth or seventh reinvention of the company. We do retail and restaurant in an environment where consumer behavior has changed radically in the last 10 to 15 years. It's completely different, and so we've had to reinvent. And you can't reinvent without looking at a market or looking at your own business through multiple lenses and through the lenses of your very diverse customer base. And so I think that's extremely important in terms of being able to stay relevant, and you have to tap into that.
So I want you to take us through Lightspeed's journey and also your insights on the art of reinvention. But let's go back a bit to some foundations, particularly with your own coming out story, because that's important to the Pride conversation, but also to Lightspeed's origins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think. I came out early at 14. I didn't think early on in my life, I don't think I had any sort of indication. I, always had crushes on girls, and when I reached that age, I was like, I sort of had a pretty clear understanding of this, and I was lucky in Vancouver to have a youth group, the Gay and Lesbian Center in Vancouver, where it wasn't until 16 or 17 that there was people my age that were also there. And I did come out to some degree at the all-boys Irish Catholic football high school that I went to. And I think the response in grade 9 was fairly mixed. But by grade 11, I think people, so I kind of quieted down about it. But then, but I had this youth center that was a real anchor for me. And I was well liked at school. So by the time it was by the time grade 11 came around, people just accepted it. And I also had this other part of my life that that was important, this youth center. And to some degree, when I started Never Apart, I was like, things like this really benefited me, and versions of it benefited people I know. A lot of the people I came out to in grade 9 ended up coming out, themselves. They just weren't ready. They weren't at the same part of the process as I was at 14, and so yeah, I think that it shaped me from an early age, and it was I didn't come out to my parents till I was 18, but I had a strong sense of my identity that was pretty clear, from that age, and I think it's well integrated and very authentic in everything I do, and I think for Lightspeed, having that. That from the very beginning, in terms of that baseline of openness, tolerance, acceptance, inclusivity, diversity, all of those things. The original team members were all LGBT, not on purpose. Yeah. It just happened that way.
So tell us about the origins.
Yeah,
You're in Vancouver, you end up in Montreal.
Yeah, so I moved to Montreal in 2001 from Vancouver. A number of friends moved with me, and we just, what we loved about the city, which, we'll talk more about Montreal, if you like, but the cultural vibrancy, the openness, the all of these things just, really sparked something in us that that actually I don't know that I would have had the same path with Lightspeed and never apart in any other place.
What is it about Montreal that fostered that?
I think it got my creative juices going, and I think that that's why there's a lot of innovation happening in the city.
Do you think that's because of Montreal, or because you're an outsider coming in, starting from scratch?
It could be. I think you appreciate something more when you come from the outside, and you appreciate it on for its own merits. In terms of Vancouver, I never appreciate Vancouver as much as a visitor or somebody from Montreal does. But I really saw, I think, the city for just actually its just unlimited potential of I could just basically do anything I wanted and create anything I wanted in any form I wanted, and there's just that liberty that allowed me to create Lightspeed and now never apart.
What prompted you to, or what inspired you to start
Lightspeed?
Lightspeed.
So I built, in Vancouver and in my early days in Montreal, I'd done all these software projects, not only for retailers, but a lot of them were, and at some point I was like, okay, I'm getting the same kinds of requests because I've built systems of a certain nature, and so when one chain of stores that I'd worked for and was building, retail management software, when it closed, I was like, okay, I've known from a young age that I wanted to have my own software company. It had always been an understanding that I would do this at some point, and I was like, hey, it's now or never. And
why software, not hardware, given your love of the Mac?
Yeah, well, I built software, and so for the first 2 years of Lightspeed, I basically programmed till 4 a.m, for a couple straight years to build a platform. And I did the business part during the day, the rest of the team, and I just found basically anybody that needed a job, and out of my circle. And we just, like any startup, just rose to the occasion of like putting on whatever hats were necessary to get this company off the ground. Later we got more selective and went to Craigslist. But it's amazing what you can do with when people just believe in our ability to do something. And I didn't have a master plan or a grand plan for the company, and I think it was very driven by faith and very driven from a spiritual place, that it would always be much, much greater than I could potentially put a 5-year plan around. Now, of course, we had all that planning, and I think one of the most helpful things for me was, we had all this great support and guidance from the agencies in Quebec and early grants, and they forced me to write a business plan. As a creative, I was like, oh, business plan, I'm not gonna ever look at this again. But that helped us really structure kind of our thinking, and I can look at that business plan today and say the spirit of that is still what we do. We still serve the same customer, although the market's been reinvented. So we were building something with that original team that was foundational for what we are today. And I think that the LGBTQ contribution to that core, to that foundation, is dominant, is echoed and is intrinsic, I think, in what Lightspeed's about. And I think the people
maybe you can explain a bit more about that. What in the LGBTQ spirit informed the early growth of Lightspeed? So
quickly, we added, the first 7 years of Lightspeed, we bootstrapped the company. We didn't take $1 of investment. So that first 7 years was just building the company on sales. And so, of course, we brought in many people that were not a part of the community. But I think as people came into the company, there was this understanding that inclusivity, diversity, everybody having a seat at the table, everybody's voice being valued, different perspectives. All of this was valued by default, and anything else was not a part of what we were, you know. And so I think that gave everybody the freedom to grow in any way that they wanted. And I think it didn't just apply to, you know, the LGBTQ people or the women or the minorities. I think it gave liberty to you know, anybody in the company to be as much of themselves and as much of, you know, all the parts of themselves as they wanted to be. And I think that you know, even the young straight men that joined the company, I think felt that they could be who they were in all the ways that they were at Lightspeed, you know, more so than other places where they had worked. And everybody was very young, but it had that special spark. And I find that to this day, when I you know, I'm very approachable and I speak to employees all the time at different events, and I still see that in the people of Lightspeed that are brand new. You know?
As the company's grown, 600 employees, 8 offices around the world, what are the challenges in maintaining that culture?
Well, it's certainly just impossible to have a single culture across a company where, you know, 200 of the employees are in Europe, you know, Amsterdam, we've got 100, that's our second biggest office, 130 people, New York, London. You know, Lightspeed New York and Lightspeed Amsterdam and Lightspeed London is never gonna have the same culture as Lightspeed Montreal, you know? And that's, I think, you know, the way the company has been built and the way and the beginnings of it, I think, allow us to have this large family that includes all of these different perspectives and different cultures. Even within an office, even within Lightspeed Amsterdam, you have engineering and salespeople and support people and back office people that have completely different viewpoints and subcultures. You know, and all of this blends together to create the whole. You know, to create something that we have to recognize that people see things different ways and people contribute in different ways, and you know, we have to bring everybody onto the same page in terms of mission and what our vision is to get to the next point, and what our values and how we conduct ourselves, and what we set as you know, as our operating principles. You know, that has to be something that everybody relates to. And we did actually we're evolving it now, but we did, when we did our first acquisition, so we've done a number of acquisitions, which is like bringing a whole other family into your family. And it's been something we've been good at.
What have you learned?
So doing acquisitions is like, you know, you get 2 founders which have created their own you know, company. You're merging that into yours. We've done that 3 times in larger and larger ways, I think it's so enriching. You know, eventually those people, if you're successful, those people become a part of that family. You know, you join cultures.
But as an entrepreneur, what can you do, or what have you learned to do to make sure they're part of the family, or they realize that they should be maybe moving on?
For the founders? Mm-hmm. You know what's funny is that
or their employees that they're bringing with
them. Right. Founders have, you know, typically founders will stay 2 years by contract, and we've always had much longer engagement with founders because we've always wanted to empower and uplift and give people ownership. You know, just because you're a part of Lightspeed and now you're no longer CEO, and that can be tough for some people. Doesn't mean that we don't expect you to have full ownership of what you've brought to the table, you know, and I think that's empowering. And so even when people leave, they still want to be re-engaged with the family. So after the first acquisition, I think we kind of thought about, you know, there is something that connects all the people at Lightspeed, no matter what coast they're on, no matter what continent they're on. And so we did come up with belief statements of what we believe. It's sort of a mix of vision and values, principles. Now we're going to evolve it, but it did actually, you know, when we surveyed everybody and we tried to come up with these cultural beliefs of the company, it did actually become like 7 statements that were something we could draw across the whole company.
Got some good questions coming in through Facebook. One is about the most challenging aspect of being a tech CEO.
So I think that the most challenging aspect is what is my role this year, you know, or in this stage of the company, because you have to be a different person for the company's needs and for your employees' needs and for your customers' needs. You have to reinvent your role.
So you have to keep reinventing yourself.
Yeah, and that can put you outside of your comfort zone. That can force you to let go of things.
Give us an example of how you've transitioned.
So when we started, there was many companies that had started around the same time, and I observed other founder/developers not be able to scale their company because they couldn't let go of the coding of the and that was like, I think, a really difficult thing for me to do. Now nobody will let me code at Lightspeed. I'm trying to get rid of my code for 8 years. But yeah, you feel like, oh, I'm managing people. That's not work, you know. Now I know that's not true. But but yeah, you know, there's just this satisfaction with building, compiling, and giving it to a customer, getting feedback that feels like real work, you know. And so by 2010, I had to transition out of that. And that's just one of the bigger and tougher reinventions, and letting go of it. And then design is something I've been very passionate about my entire life. And letting go of that to a marketing VP or marketing people, I'm like, ugh, you know? What are things going to end up looking like, you know? It's just, you have to, in order to scale, you have to think about what are the things that you let go. But then you have to celebrate the successes of the people that you give ownership to. But you've got to take full responsibility when things go completely down the tube, you know, and you got to be in there and support bringing them back. And so all of that reinvention, all of that distribution of ownership is that part of that reinvention and scaling.
Got another Facebook question here about discrimination and whether you've faced any in the tech world.
It's possible, you know, but I have a tendency to be oblivious to some to things, and yeah.
What about for your employees, though? How do you help them talk about discrimination within the workforce, within your own workplace? Every organization is wrestling with many.
Of course, and you know, and I
yeah.
think that, you know, there's conversations I can identify every week with employees where, you know, I think employees at Lightspeed, and I've had certain conversations, they, a lot of them, you know, believe it to be this place where, you know, equality and all of these values are so highly valued that we never make a misstep, and it's just not true, you know. And so people are disappointed sometimes with the way things are handled or an interaction. We're all learning, you know. People are at different points in their learning, and you know, we as leaders in the company, you know, company culture comes from the top. You know, the company's built out of culture just as much as code. That's always been our credo. And so I can try to be a great role model and try to be, you know, and have that, you know, cascade down through every person and have that come from the bottom. But it doesn't mean that we make mistakes, and that there are you know, there are missteps in how we treat one another, and so that can be disappointing to see, but those are teachable moments, right? So
you mentioned earlier about the pivots, 6 or 7 that you've made as an organization. Curious how the culture of diversity and inclusion helps you through those decisions and transitions as an organization.
Yeah, you know, we were just talking about this the other day in terms of data science, and, you know, and how we're going to apply AI to the things that we're doing to benefit small business retailers and restaurateurs, to bring this kind of technology that's, you know, the whole mission of Lightspeed has been to take, you know, technology only available to the big box guys and bring it to, you know, independents, to give them a shot against Amazon. And against chains. And so we're talking about data science and AI, and what was interesting from our new VP of Dev was, you know, we don't want data scientists only from one from one school of thought. You know, we want a diversity of schools of thought, because if we only do one, we only build certain predictive models, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of only coming to certain sets of solutions. And so, to set up, as great as the AI community is in Montreal, we have to have other kinds of people, other viewpoints, working on that data science, whether it's in foreign offices or within our own offices, but different angles, And that's another reinvention coming for us, right? Is how do we bring ML and machine learning to what we're doing and democratize that for independent retailers and restaurateurs.
And how are you finding these diverse thinkers, and how are you surfacing them or allowing them to express themselves in the organization?
Well, that takes work, right? None of it is automatic. Just because you have the origins that are LGBTQ doesn't mean that it's that all of this doesn't take tons of effort and research and thought and conversations about how to make sure that we're not creating echo chambers of thought. So it's a daily evolution, right?
It takes work and it's daily.
Absolutely, yeah.
Tell us a bit about Never Apart. It's an amazing creation that not enough people around Canada know about.
Mm-hmm. So at the 10-year mark of Lightspeed, I felt that I was completely burnt out. The startup pace is intense. And so we had this amazing moment where we moved from this just incredible building that, we bootstrapped for the first 7 years, right? After that, we took investment from Silicon Valley. We've since had $300 million US in investment from the Valley and from Canadian sources. The building that we had in Milex, which is the very hipster area of Montreal, it's where all the artists are, where a lot of them are. That was the last building I was able to buy for the company before we took investment. Investors don't want you buying real estate with their investment funds. So that was the last building I was able to buy. But we made this move because we'd split off into different offices around this area. We'd grown too much from that investment in 2012. And so we were moving to Garviger, which is this beautiful, had been abandoned for 60 years, this luxury railway hotel. So we're part of the rejuvenation of this landmark. But I had this choice of what to do with this old building that I owned, which was like this incredible warehouse that had been converted by a film producer into half his home, half his production company, had an outdoor pool. And I was like, okay, I've always dreamed about combining, everything I love about culture, everything I love about Montreal, everything I love about what artists bring to the table, that all the vibrancy that brings to this city in terms of innovation. I have the desire to have a spiritual intention for a project like this, to bring people together in a way that's not that's new, that's fresh, and so instead of just allowing this to be turned into more condos, which I don't think any city needs more condos, but I was like, hey, this is going to be the moment where that I turn this building into this project that I've always dreamed of. And so Never Apart was born. I actually.
Why did you call it Never Apart?
So Never Apart is the core of Never Apart is unseparation. We have all these divisions, all these separations that we've created, between different types of people, between us and nature, from within, between our own body and soul, and between us and, whatever we believe to be our source of spirituality. And so all of these different segmented things are, I think, where we get the source of all the problems in the world, all these divisions. And I think, sadly, you see more and more of it every day, in our news feeds. And so what is the antidote to that? The antidote to that is, well, at least the Never Apart approach is, how do we use culture, the mediums of culture, art, film, music, all of these things to break down those separations, help people understand one another, create empathy with one another through mediums of culture that are the last things that people still trust. don't trust politics anymore. We don't trust religion. We don't trust economic models. You know, these are things that, and technology and media are things that that also people are like, oh, you know, are these things helping, or are they not? So culture, I think, was a place of real opportunity, and I've learned so much from the 3 years. And I actually thought, okay, well, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this and Lightspeed. It's such a big topic and a big project, but actually it re-energized me for Lightspeed.
How so?
I think it's like this one, like you feel at some point a little, you feel like there's this startup that's consuming all of you, and you'll never get to explore this part of you that's authentically you. And just the opportunity to do that, and I thought at some point I'd have to choose, but I found that they've reinforced each other to such a degree, like we're talking about them both, you know, in this conversation.
Well, it's clearly your passion and your purpose.
And I think that there's no separation, personally, between these projects. Obviously, one is a business that caters towards towards entrepreneurs. One is a platform for artists. But when I look at it and I step back and I'm like, what is the purpose of these two organizations? Well, it's to build up leaders, you know. And you cannot make change in the world without having everybody see themselves as a leader. Like those entrepreneurs, those independents that we're supporting with Lightspeed, they're creating change in their neighborhoods. You know, they're creating, they're tying together communities. And they're being the anti-Amazon, you know. And those artists that bring expression and talk about their culture and help us understand, those are voices, and they don't think of themselves as leaders, but they are. You know?
Never a part has become integral to your business growth, from the sounds of it.
Well, I keep them very separate, but I see them as both vehicles for uplifting leaders in different ways.
And your plans were never apart. You're working on a book, I believe. A coloring book out on it. Other multimedia.
Yeah.
How big do you want to grow it?
I think we're looking at all sorts of different channels. We have a TV show on Out TV. You can watch on Out TV Go. We have an online magazine that publishes every month, and we'd like to open centers, just like we have Lightspeeds all over the world. We'd like to open Never Apart centers in other cities. I think the book is something I'm working on. It is the lessons, I think, of what I've gleaned from these two projects, and I think the pillars of it are, we talked about it earlier. I think that the core of the book is diversity. You know, I'm tackling leadership. I'm tackling culture, spirituality, and the environment / nature, and the value of diversity in each one of those. Diversity of different types of leaders. You know, the diversity of cultures, why that enriches us all. You know, the diversity in nature, why having biodiversity is something that's necessary to sustain the planet. And diversity of spirituality. What I learned in religious studies was that all these different worldviews are important to understand and to value in order for us to be a better union.
You've also become a more active voice for Venture Out. Help us understand what you see missing in the entrepreneurial community and maybe in the finance community that needs more voices like yours.
Yeah, well, finance and tech, I think, have a great opportunity to, there's so much innovation happening in fintech, all of these areas, fintech on the finance side and technology and startups. It's an opportunity to, from the get-go to include, diverse voices and make sure that there are seats at the table and make sure that that you're creating supportive company cultures. So I think that both of those areas will only progress, if there's the culture of innovation, and innovation is I think driven by having different points of view.
Another question here from Facebook about unconscious bias and how you've have you ever had to confront unconscious bias in your own organization in Lightspeed, and how did you go about that? Yeah, I think,
like I said, I think we are always learning, and I think that everybody's at different stages of that. You know, I think you always want to be at the end point of being this, you know, the environment, the work environment that you want. You want everybody to be on the same page, but I think you have to be unrelenting in your pursuit of it. But you also have to be patient. You have to meet people on their own terms and understand where people are and help them on the path. You know, I think it's you know, if there's biases, you have to you know, help people. You know, and learn yourself. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a process, right? It's not an end state. So when I see people that are disappointed with places where we failed or where we failed to live up to what we all you know, hold so valuable and uphold. I think that we all have to understand that it's a process.
The whole tech world and the tech community has been agonizing about these questions very publicly over the last while, and especially with conscious and unconscious bias. What do you think the tech community needs to come to grips with when it comes to discrimination, when it comes to non-inclusion? What do you and other tech leaders talk about in terms of where you would like the tech world to go in the next few years?
Right. So, you know, it's if you take the lesson of how we started the company, right? It just happened to start with a number of LGBTQ employees because that's the community I belong to. But many other people start companies with their very close circle of friends, and people hire people like them, you know. And this is actually the lesson that we learned and so that's where you can, if you're not conscious of it and you don't actively put effort into building up your team with diversity and inclusion in mind, then you're going to end up with a monoculture. And I think we found, you know, we had a tough lesson early on at Never Apart. You know, also a team that was, you know, primarily LGBTQ, and we had a lot of female artists on the music side, and we thought we were doing great about that. But because we hadn't enlarged our circle enough and hadn't put the effort on the art side, there wasn't as many women artists, and we got called out on it, and we actually felt really hurt because, you know, we're trying to be, this is what the center's about. So whenever, you know, but we had to really step back and we're like, okay, you know, we're not widening our circle enough to be meeting these women artists, and you have to own up to mistakes that you make, and you have to widen your circle. You cannot keep it your comfort zone of your own, you know, people that are like you.
Right. We've got only a few minutes left. Yeah. Maybe you can share some thoughts on what's next for Lightspeed.
So Lightspeed, I think, has some exciting milestones ahead. You know, we're looking to be IPO ready next year. That's you know, depends on market conditions, but you know, I think that when I talk to our customers, the independent businesses that we're working with, you know, it used to be 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 stores. We're seeing them scale into like 150 store situations using the cloud. So I feel like the independents of today are the chains of tomorrow, you know, and the real innovative businesses that are relevant. And I don't want to see cities that are just McDonald's and Starbucks and just like the same things repeated on every block. We want the independent spirit, and so that's our mission, and to keep cities vibrant with that independent flavor. And so I think we have a lot to do to make sure that those companies are powered by great tech. So I think that's making sure that we have a great footprint here in North America and Europe, where we are present, but also global aspirations are definitely a part of the story.
You've mentioned a couple of times the A word for Amazon.
Yeah.
How do you wrestle with that, with the challenge not just of Amazon, but of the global platforms that seem to be eating so many businesses? Yeah,
well, you know, that's a very undiverse kind of, you know, if all the decisions in the world or all the technology is concentrated with Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, then that's a certain prediction of what the world's going to be, you know, a certain curating of everything we see, everything we experience, and I think that we have to we have to be dependent on their benevolence in order for for us to have human experiences that are authentic. And so, yeah, I think there's positives and there's certainly things to be cognizant of, and there has to be other companies that are adding to the picture.
And what will be critical for Lightspeed over the next 3 to 5 years to grow and prosper in that sort of competitive environment?
Well, reinvention is an absolute key. I think we've proven. I mean, our market is. Things have completely flipped. Consumers don't shop and eat the way they did 10 years ago. So reinvention has become an instinct. It's become something that we're used to doing, and that's, I think, something that in bringing in other cultures, doing acquisitions and bringing in other cultures, I think, is something that is in our DNA. And so I think we'll be able to enrich and reinvent on that basis, and I think it's pretty. That's what I'm excited for.
Maybe I can take you back to Pride for a final question about what we should all be thinking about as we go about our business today, but every day this year. What are we not paying enough attention to?
I think what we need to think about is I think we should really, and I think it's the theme of this talk. We're all looking for sources of innovation. And I think that it's upon us to reflect on how diversity and inclusivity, how that is such a core part of how innovation happens in general. Often these words are associated with the LGBT community or with ethnic communities, but it's creativity. All of this, all of what's amazing about humanity, and there's certainly tons that isn't, but all of the best of us is when we are involved in something that's creating good.
You talked about diversity of leadership, diversity of environment, diversity of spirituality, diversity of people.
Yeah,
it's a great message.
Thank you.
Before we go, we make a donation to a charity on behalf of all our guests at Disruptors, and Dax has asked us to contribute to Rainbow Road. Maybe you can say a few words about why you picked.
Yeah, Rainbow Railroad, is a charity that helps LGBTQ people in countries that are, hostile and oppressive, towards people in our community. And it helps them with, and of course, there's lots and lots of requests for help. There's a lot of people in places that are unsafe. I look at where my parents came from in Uganda. And if they weren't expelled by Idi Amin, the dictator, I might still be there. And that is one of the least safe places in the world to be an LGBTQ person. And I look at all the benefits I have in this wonderful country and all the things that are open to me and things I've been able to do, and I think about that LGBTQ person in Uganda and other countries like it. That's why I think Rainbow Railroad is I think an important thing for us to think about and realize that, yes, we have a long road to go in this country, but there are other people in other places that have a much further road and have a really, it's a situation that we all pray for and hope.
That's a great message. As Dave mentioned in the opening, tomorrow is National Indigenous Persons Day. We'll be having a celebration in this room, and hope everyone can stop tomorrow to give a bit of thought to the issues there. Pride continues through the month, but is highlighted in Toronto, at least, on Sunday with the Pride Parade. I believe there's 700 or so RBCers in the parade, so it's an incredible day. Dax, thank you for spending some time here with us today. Thank you for your leadership, and congratulations on your success at Lightspeed. Can't wait to follow and see what you do next.
Thank you.
So, I'd ask, Thank you all for joining us here today, and for those on WebEx and Facebook, thanks for being part of the conversation. You can continue with the conversation through those channels. Please mark your calendars. July 18th is the next RBC Disruptors, when we'll be joined by a couple of stars from Silicon Valley, Chris O'Neill from Evernote and Jennifer Tejeda from PagerDuty. So that'll be on July 18th. Until then, happy Pride.
Thank you.
Thanks.